Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second in a series of conversations on experiential hospitality. My name is Fran. I'm the co-founder of Turneo, and today I'll be chatting to my co-founder Mattia about the experiences effect and the impact experiences-led strategy has on hotels. Now, we've done some great research, Mattia, and we're going to get to that and the impact on RevPAR. Before we go into that, let's put some context around it. So, how are guest behaviors today changing? And specifically, let's talk about the trip planning stage. What's happening to it at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the big misconceptions in the travel industry is that experiences are ancillary products and that rooms are the core product. And I think it comes from the fact that big players in the industry are hotels and airlines are the two big types of companies, and experience players are very small. But actually, think about a traveler. If you're a traveler, you're almost never planning your trip around a hotel. You're always planning your trip around experiences. And what you do as a traveler, imagine you're going with your partner to Tuscany. You're not going to be saying, hey, let's stay for 3 nights because there is this particular hotel there. And then maybe your partner comes and say like, well, but I actually want to sleep in that hotel for 5 nights. So let's say 5 nights. Like, that's just not how people think. The way they think about it, they're going to say, hey, we want to go to Tuscany because we want to go and do some wine tasting. We want to do truffle hunting. We want to explore the gastronomy. And you might plan out 2 or 3 days of things to do. And then maybe your partner says like, hey, but there's this winery and actually we should visit Florence. So let's add another 2 days to the trip. So the planning is all around experiences. And only once you plan out that, you're actually going to decide how long you're going to stay, what is the exact hotel that enables you to do that things, or an Airbnb. And that's something that I think the travel industry has always kind of gotten a little bit wrong because they were focused on the suppliers and not focused on the customers. And if you look at research, it shows that today, 98% of travelers plan their trip around experiences. And I think everyone in the travel industry should start from the guest and say like, well, if the guests are starting from experiences, everything they do should also start from experiences.
I firmly fit in those 98%. When I was planning my 30th birthday, I think, I said I really wanted to dive in Sipadan. And it's this tiny little island off the coast of Borneo. And my first idea was, okay, I want to dive Sipadan, which is something that you really have to plan. You have to get licenses and permits. You have to book it with a dive school, etc. And then when I had that planned, that's when I went and booked my flight. That's when I went and booked my hotel, etc. Right? So I can definitely attest to the fact that people want to experience something and then they plan around that.
And how did you then decide where you're going to stay once you decided you want to be diving?
Well, actually, the interesting thing about Sipadan is that certain dive schools are attached to certain hotels and they get allocated dive permits, in fact, for the island because there's a restriction on how many divers can go and dive Sipadan on a day. So that was connected. My booking of the dive was directly connected to where I was staying with because I wanted to dive on my 30th birthday and there were only certain dive schools who had that permit. So come to think of it, yes, it was very closely linked, those two things. All right, cool. So the guest behaviors are changing. Travelers are planning things slightly differently than before. What impact does that have on hoteliers?
Yeah. I think for the hoteliers, the impact is that they need to start thinking about experiences as part of their core offering and not as ancillary. And I think, again, often the hotel industry is starting from kind of the operational point of view and not from the guest. And even you can think about all the systems they use, they're always about managing the property, managing the revenue, very rarely about managing the guests. And they're very rarely about managing the experience the guests are going to have. So I think over time, hoteliers are going to move more into managing experiences and move a little bit less from managing rooms, which is going to be considered the basic. Of course, you need to manage rooms, but the differentiation comes from managing experiences.
I think, property management systems, PMSs, were built to manage the property, right? To manage rooms. And then they really made it simpler for a hotel to manage their ops. Revenue management systems came later to optimize the revenue, right? To help manage those peaks and troughs, the demand variations in the hospitality industry. And what we're seeing now is the emergence of experience management systems that I think do exactly what you say. They help hoteliers manage the experiences that their guests came to the destinations to do or to experience. So that makes perfect sense. Another thing I'm thinking about is, in a lot of hotels, you've got those big walls of flyers with all of the experiences you can do in a destination. And you've got the tours desks sometimes where you can sit down and you can book yourself onto a tour or an experience. Oftentimes, they're not utilized very well. So what's happening around that, and how are guest behaviors actually impacting the tours desks or the walls of flyers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised they're not utilized, because you think about majority of travelers today, that's the exact format they don't want to interact with. I think you can probably split, like broad brush, you can split behavior into two buckets. One is you might want something extremely personalized. So you might want a concierge that's going to plan out like the very fine detail of the experience you're going to have. You'll still probably interact with them digitally, right? And you might need to pay digitally, but like you want a person to be really involved. And then for, I think, vast majority of things, you want a simple, seamless process, which you're going to do from your device, likely before you even arrive at the destination. And these tour desks, these walls of flyers, they just fit nowhere. Like before you had a phone, before you had internet, before you had smartphones, before you had eSIMs, like it made sense that you would walk to that and take a flyer. I think today, for almost no other aspect in life, do you go physically and look up at the offer? You always do it on your phone. And it's the same with experiences. Now, I think hotels, they've kind of been a little bit resistant to investing in experiences because managing it in a non-digital way is really hard. But if you actually approach it as an offering that you can manage digitally and use the right tools, I think it's not that hard. There just needs to be this transition that is happening with a lot of leading hotels, and probably in 5 years, maybe 6 years, it's going to sound crazy that people were booking experiences by walking to a tour desks, or that anyone thought that's the way of the future. It'll just make so much more sense that you have digital systems where you have all the data, you have all the analytics, and you enable amazing kind of booking journey for your guests.
Yeah, but what I think won't change is the fact that we're seeing today as well that 80% of guests still want hotel recommendations on things to do in a destination. And that makes so much sense. I've booked a hotel, I've paid it maybe $1,000, $2,000 or euros, and I have a trust. It's a building there, and there's a brand in front of that building, and there are people in that building, and I'm walking up there and I do have a sense of trust. So I want the recommendation. It's just that as a guest or as a traveler, how I consume that recommendation has changed. And there is no way in hell, I think, that I would want to do an amazing experience in a destination. Let's say I'm traveling to Beijing and I want to see the Great Wall of China, that I'll say, yeah, I'm 3 days in Beijing. I'll just walk up in the morning and ask, can I go today? No, I'm going to plan that in advance. I'm going to plan that maybe a week or two before my journey. And so it's so incredibly important that the hotel that I trust gives me that recommendation and enables me to book it as easily as I've booked the hotel as well.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think trust is something that sometimes people don't think about enough in travel. But when you're traveling, you're in a foreign destination often, or at least in a different city, you're in a vulnerable state. So actually, you want to work with brands that you trust. And I think hotels often have that trust of the guest. And the great thing for the hotel that plays in that space is that if they deliver on the trust, the brand loyalty, the brand value goes up, because the guests have, in a way, given you trust in a situation where they're uncomfortable. They're in China for the first time in their life. They don't speak the local language. They trusted a hotel. If the hotel delivers, the trust goes even further for any future interaction, for anything where they might recommend it to another person. They'll say, hey, you don't need to worry about it. Just ask this hotel where I stayed. They will arrange an amazing tour for you because they've delivered on the trust. So it's really, really important.
And that trust does bring some financial results as well. And that was the topic of our research that we've done, the experiences effect. Can you give us a bit of context? What was the point of research? What did we look into? And then we can get into what the results are as well.
Yeah. So when we set out to do this research, we were guided by the idea that experiences are not just ancillary revenue; they're actually a core part of what hotels have to offer. But it was really hard to know what's the impact of it, because a very simplistic way to measure impact of experiences is to measure the revenue line of ancillaries. And you say, I as a hotel have sold 100,000 euros of experiences last year. That's the impact. And we just thought, we knew intuitively that's not the main impact, but there was just no research that backed it up. And so we set out to actually do the research on that and find out, well, what is the impact of experiences on total revenue that hotels are actually earning?
Okay, so sum it up for everyone. What is the impact on RevPAR, which we, I think, took as a main metric?
Yeah, so the total impact on RevPAR is before I answer that, let me just explain what we did, like how we researched it. In terms of research, what we've done is we looked at hotel groups. We looked at 120 hotel groups across the world. They collectively have over 12 million rooms, and they collectively are responsible for over 131 billion in revenue. So a really big sample. And we looked at how much they're focused on experiences, and then we compared that to their revenue per available room. And if you think about how they're focused on experiences, we looked at a couple of factors. We looked at how much are experiences part of their brand story. We looked at how personalized experiences are, but also how authentic they are. And then we looked at how embedded are they in the booking journey and into the digital presence of the hotel.
And so those three things form the experience index, right? Is that what we're saying?
Exactly. We then scored all of the hotel groups on those criteria and created an experience index, which enables us to score any of these hotels, but actually any hotel that might want to get their own score. We can say how experiential their offering is.
Okay. And what did we see? So let's say we've got a couple of buckets in terms of experience index. How do they differ in terms of their RevPAR?
Yeah. So the exciting thing we found out is that the hotels that are in the high experiential bucket, they have much higher RevPAR than hotels in medium and low buckets. So for an example, hotel in a high bucket has over 200% higher RevPAR or revenue per available room than a hotel in a low bucket in terms of experience index.
Wow. That is so 200% higher revenue per available room than hotels with a lower index in terms of experiences.
Yes.
Okay. What can a hotel do? You mentioned the three elements of experience index. So if you were to go and recommend to hotels how to increase their experience index and therefore increase their RevPAR, what are some of the steps that they can do to do that?
So I think it has to start from thinking about the experience offer. That's the first step, to really say, like, what are the experiences I want to offer to my guests? And then the next really important part is enabling guests to actually book those experiences. Those are the two kind of like key enabling pieces that hotels really need to focus on. But then the third piece, which kind of like completes this whole triangle, is the need to start managing it. That means that experiences are no longer an ancillary product that is managed at the hotel by, like someone who is, I'll need to redo. They need to start managing the experiences because experiences have a huge impact on satisfaction of the guests and on their return. And if you know this is part of your core product, you really want to make sure you have a system to manage that, and you're not, keeping track on pen and paper and never asking the guests were they happy with it or not.
Yeah, I think that guest satisfaction on experiences is so important, because when the guest has an incredible experience outside of the hotel, comes back to the hotel and is leaving a review at the end of their stay, that experience impacts that review. In fact, we found that guests who booked experiences through the hotel leave 8% higher review on the hotel itself, on the property itself. So knowing which experiences are the ones guests love is so important. And with the old pen and paper method, it's not as easy to track, to know, but also to manage the actual offering, to remove experiences that guests perhaps weren't satisfied with, or to add new experiences that are happening in town. Perhaps there's a new wine tour, perhaps there's a new gastronomic offering that you want to integrate into your hotel offering. So management is absolutely a priority as well.
And I would say traditionally, again, the way hotels think about experience is just the extra spend that's ancillary. But actually there's 4 places where experiences really enhance the core product. First of all is actually on the promotion side. If you focus your marketing around experiences rather than rooms, you're going to have much higher engagement because that type of content is more engaging. We see with some of our customers or some of the hotels that we work with, over 40% higher engagement with experiential content compared to room type content. The other thing that is really important around experiences is in terms of the actual booking and the room nights, because people that book experiences stay 40% longer. They also have about 30% lower cancellation rate. So the more of your guests are booking experiences, the more room nights you're actually going to be selling because they're staying longer and they're not canceling them. Then of course comes the third piece, which is spend at the destination, which I think everyone gets. And then the last piece, which you mentioned, which is so important, is that guests that book experiences, they actually become more loyal guests because once they have a great time at a destination, they're more likely to rebook with that hotel. They're more likely to recommend it to friends, to leave a higher Google rating or higher rating on booking.com. And that then kind of closes the loop and you get more guests because of that.
Yeah, so you've got higher engaged guests who stay longer, who spend more, and who become more loyal to the hotel brand just because of experiences.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So the research is obviously going to be in the link below. Is there anything else in terms of the findings that you wanted to highlight?
I think the only thing I'd maybe add is that we've done the assessment on 120 groups. There's a lot more groups in the world, a lot more hoteliers, even independent hotels have the same benefit. It's just, our focus was on hotel groups. But so, we're happy to do assessments for customers. We have automated tools to enable us to do it. So if other hotels that are not part of the index want to get their scores, we're happy to do it for them. And there's going to be a form somewhere in the link to do that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks everyone for listening. This was a second in a series of conversations on experiential hospitality. My name is Fran, co-founder of Turneo. Thank you for listening and see you soon. Bye-bye.